Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us once again on the World Health Network YouTube channel. My name is Ben Calderwood. We're going to continue our series today focused on people living with long COVID, and that's part of WHN's Long COVID Awareness Campaign. I'd like to tell you a little bit about that campaign before we get started. So WHN launched the Long COVID Awareness Campaign to educate people about the long COVID crisis, to explore the numerous health impacts associated with long COVID, to dispel as many myths as we can around the condition, and to discuss opportunities for long COVID research and advocacy. And additionally, we really want to try our best to reach out to people who are fortunate enough to have not been touched personally by long COVID. And that's fundamentally because the long COVID community needs allies. We need people who, even if they haven't had a personal experience with long COVID, who are willing to reckon with the urgency of what amounts to an ongoing mass disabling event and act accordingly. And we'll talk a little bit with our guest later about what that might look like. Perhaps the most important thing we always like to share when we begin these conversations when it comes to long COVID is that everyone is at risk. Long COVID is not limited to people with pre-existing health conditions. It is not limited to people who have not been vaxxed or to any other group. If you've had a COVID infection, you are at risk of post-COVID health impacts, including long COVID, which leads us to the closing thought here. The best way to avoid long COVID is to avoid COVID infection entirely. If you'd like more information about this campaign or about WHN, you can visit us online at whn.global. And with that, I would like to welcome Becky Robertson of McKinney, Texas, to the broadcast today. I really want to thank you for participating.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to share my story.
Well, so tell us a little bit about yourself, about your background, and about your experience with long COVID.
Well, first of all, you introduced me, and I'm from McKinney, Texas, a mother of one. She is 21 years old. I was married, but due to long COVID and COVID in general, we are no longer married. This takes a toll on a relationship, and whether you're a caregiver or you're the patient, so to speak. But it takes a toll on a relationship, and it got to the point where we couldn't sustain it anymore. It's hard taking care of a sick person. I don't know. I was a teacher. I'm trying to think back 5 years because it seems like a decade ago. But I was a school teacher. I was a soccer mom. I was the one who volunteered at school for all of the parties. I am the one who drove a pink van and took all the girls to school and picked them up. And so I was that mom. And then my daughter and I were going to the zoo, and on the Dallas 35, that is the biggest that's the biggest stretch where there are accidents. I didn't know that, but I know it now. And we were hit by a semi truck. So hit by the semi truck, off guard. I mean, didn't see that one coming. We spun, and then we smashed into a median, and then he T-boned me on my side. She ended up being okay, had some neck strain. However, she moved with when I was turning into the spin, because I guess that's what you're supposed to do. I was turning into the spin, but I was holding so tight and rigid that I was the one most injured, whereas my daughter, she was flowing with the car. So I was against the, I don't know, a velocity or whatever you call it, but I was the one most injured. The gentleman did not have insurance, so we had a big legal case so that I could get repaired. I had sustained a traumatic brain injury. Horrible. I didn't know who my daughter was. I certainly didn't know the alphabet. I couldn't write. I couldn't carry on a conversation. It was a very lonely, isolated experience. And I went through surgery after surgery on my spine. decompression and herniated discs, one surgery after the other, and I was a mess, going to physical therapy. Then finally, we were having the big surgery at the end of 2019. And my doctor said, I'm only
at the end of the year 2019, I believe, right? Yes.
Yes, 20.
Okay.
And my doctor said, orthopedic, I am not doing this surgery on you. I am not going in to cut open your neck and put 6 screws in your neck unless you can agree to me you're going to stay away from cigarette smoke, germs. You're going to be the girl in the bubble for a while. And no problem. And he's like, I'm serious. You cannot even get a cold. Okay, that's fine. So upon my second visit, it had just turned 2020. I mean, this was in December. So 2020, I went in for my checkup and he seemed rattled. And he said, I need you to know that there is, and it was interesting because, well, he's a doctor. I assume that's why he knew. He said, listen, there's a virus going around, this illness, and chances of it hitting here, I don't know. But I can tell you that it's something you need to worry about. I know you're social and whatnot. And you really need to worry about it. If you get it, you're dead. I mean, absolutely no joke. You will die if you get it. Your body is so weak, you cannot handle it. So being bedridden, I figured I'm going to do everything I can to know everything I can about this illness, where it came from, how to treat it, what it does to the body. And I started realizing that it really, really damages the brain. And this is in 2020. So I guess you have to really go dig for that information. Sure. But it was, and I got scared. I got really, really scared. And next thing you know, it was like a whirlwind. All of a sudden, it's all over the news. It went from one day to the next. All of a sudden, it's all over the news. And what are we going to do? Oh my gosh, should we lock down, et cetera, et cetera. And it was such a precarious time. Everyone, I think we sustained some level of PTSD. I mean, whether it's you, me, I think we all did. And I was going to cognitive rehab every day. But I was going there intelligently. I was wearing a mask. We didn't know what we knew about masks then at all. So I figured a surgical mask would be fine. Didn't realize now. I know now at 95. So I went to cognitive rehab. I asked the manager, owner, doctor, please, can you make sure everyone else here it wears a mask? Because
Becky, you're in cognitive therapy at this point, right? That's okay, great. Yep.
And mind you, most of it, you're kind of in a computer room and you're doing all of your cognitive rehab on a computer. Sure. And but we do have a time during the day that we have a group therapy, which I used to love. I mean, it was fantastic. You're talking to people who can relate with you, and you take into consideration we have brain injuries, so we're going to make mistakes. We're probably not all there. Well, one day go in after having pleaded that he would have everyone wear masks, and he said, it's not mandated. I don't have to do it. Well, in Texas, we have a governor who thinks this is a joke. And so he said, until it's mandated, but there's nothing I can do. I'm like, well, if you can make the suggestion. No. So group therapy comes around. And I sat down, and directly across from me, and it was your traditional like lunch table. Directly across from me was one of my cohorts. And no joke that he looked exactly like Patrick Dempsey from the movie Outbreak. If you remember that on the plane, he looked exactly like that. I mean, he was red, he was sweating, he looked exhausted. And the first thing I knew is I knew looking at him. And I'm like, if he doesn't have this virus, he's got some virus. So I said, Gary, how come you came today? You obviously are not feeling well. And he said, well, I had to get out of the house because my mother and my sister are really, really sick.
Mhm.
Oh, okay. So can't fault the guy. He didn't know better. Nobody knew better. It's not like now where you have expectations that people should know. So I came home that day. I'm in a lawsuit, by the way, for this whole deal. Let me just remind you of that. So I have to go. I mean, I've had people say, well, you didn't have to go. Why did you do that? I was in a lawsuit, and you can't divert from anything that they ask you to do.
And attending cognitive therapy was a critical piece of this, and so that's why you felt compelled to participate because of the lawsuit, is what you're saying. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And it was hard because I couldn't drive. I was in that bad of shape mentally. So my daughter would sit outside in the car, or my husband, or a friend, or I'd Uber. And I didn't have much autonomy, which is probably for the best. And I came home to my husband and daughter, and I walked in and I said, please stay away from me. I I think I have it. And, at that time, it was just kind of an it. We didn't quite have nicknames for it and acronyms and whatnot. Uh, and I said, stay in another room. Just stay away from me. It's really important to me. I may have nothing, but I feel like I was exposed. Well, because I was sitting across from him, I know a lot now about viral load. I didn't then. If I did, obviously things would be different. But having spent an hour in group therapy with him, directly across from him, and my baggy blue surgical mask, I can only imagine how much viral load. I think that that's probably why I got as sick as I did. It was a tremendous, if you could see, literally, if you could see the little pathogen microbes floating in the, I swear that I can see them when we're talking. I came home, woke up, and my husband was very stubborn. My daughter, she's a teenager, and thinks nothing of it. And I do my best not to scare her. My husband, no, I needed him to be scared because I was scared.
As you were discussing a moment ago, Becky, you were telling us about your experience not long after you were likely infected by this individual in your group cognitive therapy session, obviously coming home, and how your family, your husband and your daughter, were responding to this, and the efforts you were taking to try to prevent them from getting sick as well at this point in time. And I believe this was early 2020. Do I have that right? Okay.
So, funny enough is that Friday, our governor implemented the mask mandate. So timing was ironic.
Sure.
I asked my husband, please sleep in a different room. He's very stubborn, and no, he wasn't going to. He was going to sleep right by me at my side. Now that's looking back, I can't think of anything more risky, but he didn't get it, at least not at that time. In the morning, I woke up, and I had never experienced a headache like what I had when I woke up. It was a head in a vice, and it wasn't just like your typical migraine, which I never had until long COVID, but it gripped my head so hard I couldn't see straight. Everything was fuzzy. I was scared. I don't know if that made it worse because I was the first of anybody in my neighborhood. I was the first of anyone that really anybody knew in my circle.
Mm-hmm.
And with the looming death threat, I was terrified. I don't think that I've ever been more terrified in my life. And we went to go see the doctor. He ended up being, in retrospect, he was one of the frontline doctors that ended up being one of the hydrochloroquine, Z-Pak, vitamin D, etc. He had that whole regimen and all those doctors that were making a scene. But he was also the only doctor offering anything. So I hedged my bets. I really had no choice but to go to him. So I do his regimen, and my husband does it. My daughter does it. Then my daughter started having the same headache. Well, it starts turning into a severe cold, severe. And I've never experienced anything like it. I mean, Mucinex didn't take a dent at all. And so my daughter and I were loading up on melatonin and CBD and all of the vitamins, zinc, D, C, anything we could that would reduce inflammation that, we'd heard of online that might help. And I got to the point where my blood oxygen level, and I knew this, that if it got like 92 and below at the time, that's what the standard was.
Yeah.
That I needed to go to the hospital. And we spoke as a family and decided that, all right, we're going to do this. If I'm going to die, I'm going to die at home with my husband and my daughter and my pets. This comes in. The cat ended up getting COVID as well. We didn't know at the time then, of course, that it could go from human to animal. And I mean, I guess it makes sense, but we didn't know at the time. So the cat gets sick. I'm sick. I'm thinking I'm on the way out. We complete my will. And I didn't know I was delusional. It would make sense. I mean, I think I'm dying. I see the world is coming to an end and I'm scared and my daughter's sick. Who wouldn't be delusional? I was beyond. We know now how badly it impacts the brain, but we didn't know then at all. We knew it somewhat, affected neurological issues, but we didn't know so much as far as mental health and just the delirium of it all, and the fear and the nightmares and the night terrors. And we had wild insomnia. So I'm thinking, okay, culmination of all of these things together makes sense. I'm going to be loopy. I'm scared. I haven't slept. Who knows what's going on inside my body? My family called because I had been posting non-stop all of my research, everything that I read about COVID. I felt it necessary to put that on Facebook and share it with the world.
You're certainly not alone in that thought at that point in time. So,
Yeah, I thought I was doing humanity a favor by doing it. I mean, I really did. And yeah, you have to put a lot of real uglies out there, is what I call them. So I was putting the uglies out there, the peeling toes and a bloody tongue, all of these random symptoms that were happening. Well, it hit my daughter in GI. So she was having all of her issues waist down. And she didn't seem delirious to me. But my family called to see how we were doing and lecture me about posting incessantly about this virus. And they said, this is family. You look entirely crazy. What are you doing putting prescription bottles and all of your doctor's appointments and all of your receipts and all of your supplements? Why are you sharing this? Pictures of your oxygen, your oximeter, pictures of your thermometer. Why are you doing this? You're making yourself look completely crazy. And I didn't, it was a dear family member. And I started letting that really eat me. And I mean, I thought, I mean, it does make sense. Yeah, sure. I guess now that I hear it out loud, I do look crazy. And um, I kept posting anyways. I'm stubborn that way. And plus, I thought I was going to die, so who cares? And I kept posting. This family member calls me again. It's a very significant family member. And without saying who it is, it's somebody that really makes an impression on you growing up and determines what you are and are not going to do. Anyhow, he said, you just want to make yourself relevant. That stung. It stung a lot. And I said, no, I just want to share the experience because I don't want anyone else going through this. And I said, and I'm angry. I'm angry that Trump didn't shut things down. I'm angry that he didn't shut down travel in time. Well, my family is in love with all things Trump. In love. He got so angry and said, do not ever call me again. And I'm like, no, you don't mean that. I got a doctor calling me on the other line. No big deal. I'll call you back. And he said, no, don't. And it has been 5 years now that I've spoken with my family. It's been really difficult.
You were telling us about, the efforts that you were making to care for yourself during your acute COVID infection and sharing the information that you were researching online and the reaction that you were receiving from some of your family members to your desire to share and how they reacted to that. Tell us a bit more about what some of those interactions were like.
I was told that I looked crazy. And I think that before I was kind of cut off from the family and they read me the riot act about how nuts I looked. And, looking back, I'm sure I did. I'm sure I did look nuts because I had COVID insomnia. I'm up 24 hours a day. And so every piece of research was right there on Facebook for the world to see. And that is when I first realized people don't want to believe what they don't want to believe. If they don't want to see it, they're not going to see it. So everything that I was posting, I was called a liar. I needed attention. I'm a hypochondriac. It got really humiliating. And the way I combated it was with science. Every time someone would refute one of my symptoms or anything that was going on, I would refute it by putting in a medical journal or a study. Well, it turns out that after all of my research, that was probably the best thing I could have done for my cognitive rehab. Long term, it made a big difference. I mean, my brain was trying to put 2 and 2 together and make things make sense in a world that I knew nothing about. Obviously, it's not real common that people know everything about epidemiology and virology. Now it's my second nature. So the abuse I was taking from everybody, I think I'm dying. My daughter's sick. I mean, it was just a whirlwind of things. I was so delirious that I thought Keanu Reeves was Jesus. So I sent him a novel on Twitter, a novel about all that he's done and all that I'm grateful for. And I'm surprised the guy didn't block me. He didn't respond either. But that crazy haze, I also thought my grandmother had died. So I took it upon myself at 4 o'clock in the morning to copy every single person in my family on my phone So there's a good like 35, 40 people that I wrote this message to, letting them know the passing of my grandmother. And she hadn't passed. So that didn't go over real well with the family. And but who's to know? I mean, I couldn't explain my behavior and I really believed it. And that's scary because this virus will grip your mind. It will absolutely arrest it. And it takes over what you think, how you feel. I didn't realize what an impact I would have put me in the loony bin. I really would have. I mean, I was that erratic, that out of control. So my family finally said, we're not going to do this anymore. You look like a fool. Don't call us again.
If I
And
can, may I,
yeah,
if I can clarify for just one moment this, and I have to acknowledge, obviously the profound reaction that your family had to this sort of behavior and this unfortunate sort of ostracization, I guess I do want to acknowledge that this intense delirium that you're describing at this point in your life, in looking back on your experience, that was part of the acute phase of your infection, or it was the acute phase of your infection? We haven't or I guess that's kind of part of the next question is, do you feel that led you, excuse me, into beginning to think about whether this was long COVID, or if that transition was clear or distinct or gray, and how you felt about that at the time?
well, I I had to be a little more self-aware, and I was so in my head that I couldn't quite understand what was going on at the time.
Sure.
But when my family said, you just want to make yourself relevant, don't call us again, I really didn't think that they meant it. I just thought, no, they temper, and of course they don't like me bringing attention to the family, and I do look a little bit hysterical. And I start watching these numbers. Now, mind you, I start getting sicker and sicker. So I am going to go get x-rays. I'm finding out that I have double pneumonia and I have this horrible pain under my ribs. My oxygen was dropping into the 80s. I still was not going to go to the hospital. We got oxygen at home. It was ugly. It was really ugly. And my body had changes that I would have never thought. If I could just be graphic, I had a period after I've already gone through menopause 10 years ago. Things that were going on with my body, that hair falling out. I would pick up big balls of hair in my shower. My skin started getting all like old looking and little rashes here and there. But the pain in my joints and in my body altogether, it wouldn't go away. It hurt to walk. It hurt to move, really. And I would crawl to the bathroom. So where this ties in is that when I'm watching the numbers and I'm in this state, all I see is two columns, and it was hospitalized and deaths. And I kept writing, like whenever I'd see that, I would write, some people never recover. On every newscast, every WHO update on Facebook, that was my big thing. Some people don't recover. And I didn't know, if I knew then, what this was going to become. Because it's true, as we know, some people really don't recover. I found support groups while I was looking for information, and so Survivor Corps was the first original, and that was where I started becoming the Chicken Little. And so I'm throwing all of the information on there. The sky is falling. I find more support groups. Well, they're popping up all over the place, and gave me a sense of family. and people who understood, but we were all scared and we knew nothing. But I found my tribe, and I found the people that understood what I was going through. And we all developed a real dark sense of humor because that's the only way to get us through it. And we all had the insomnia. We all had the night terrors. We all had trouble in our relationships under our roof because it was so difficult. And if you're not a caregiver, you don't know what this job entails. And it's taxing. It sucks your soul. I mean, it really does. You're forevermore just a caregiver. And I mean, that's a big job, but some people aren't cut out for that role. And
May I ask,
huh?
Becky, are you referring to yourself? Are you referring to yourself in a caregiver role, perhaps as caring for your daughter, or are you referring to other people who are caring for you while you're going through this?
A little of both.
Okay,
Me, my daughter, me caring for myself,
sure.
been caring for both of us. And every time you turn around, it was, can you go get me some Vicks? Can you go get me this juice? Can you get me that? But it can't have sugar in it because sugar causes inflammation. And the poor boy was an errand boy for a week. I would try and make light of it. And I'm like, you're my cabana boy. Well, he didn't think that was funny. And it took a toll, a strong toll. And the distance just, it started. But the thing is, I was finding such connections with everybody I met online. And there were people who gave me hope. There were doctors and scientists that would answer questions about our conditions and give us insight. And when you're fighting for your life, that is a hell of a lot more important than laying in bed watching the Spurs game. And I would go into the closet and carry on my conversations all night long with these people, and we would share research. And I still was not getting better. The fevers would come and go. Now, mind you, when I first got sick, I didn't have a fever at all. I was extremely sick and did not have any fever. So this litmus test that they've developed, and everyone says, and CDC especially, if you don't have a fever, you're free to go out and do whatever you want. And that was also at the time, I mean, the test was negative. It came up positive later. That was when we had issues with all the tests, and we were finding out that, you know, probably 50% of them looking back were not accurate. So I've got all of that going, and I know this is just a whirlwind of stuff going on at the same time. And it was, and I guess looking back at it, my heart starts racing because you don't realize until you actually talk about it. And I haven't revisited this topic in a while. I've never known fear in my life like I did during my acute infection. I've also never known fear where every night that I go to bed, and this is something that is still with me. Every night when I go to bed, I don't know if I'm going to wake up in the morning. I'm not alone in this. A lot of my really dear friends that I've made in my support groups, we all feel that way. We don't know. Are we going to have a stroke? Are we going to have a heart attack? Is there going to be a blood clot? Is our oxygen saturation going to fall so low, because it tends to do that in the middle of the night? And especially when no one's there. No one's there to help you. And the government doesn't provide anybody. Your health insurance doesn't provide anybody. And so here I am. My husband had pulled back. So I'm doing all of this on my own. My daughter, she was kind of getting better, but she said she was feeling better, but I could see she wasn't quite herself. But I was so wrapped up in me and my pain and what was going on that I didn't pay as much attention to her as I probably should have. So still now, the only thing that they mentioned, again, recovery, hospitals, deaths, never once did they ever mention those people that don't recover. And it was still a while before they came up with the term long COVID. At first, tongue in cheek, they called it long haulers, which I hated because that sounds like we're a bunch of truckers. And but it, eventually it did. And so we are toying with the name. Is it coronavirus? Is it COVID? And what is this condition? I was testing negative at that point. So why was I still having all of these symptoms? It didn't make sense. That's never been the case with any illness. That, I mean, you might have a lingering cough, but certainly your joints don't hurt. Your thoughts don't go all over the place into dark spaces that it's not supposed to go into. And I mean, there was suicidal ideation. There wasn't self-harm, but I knew I needed counseling. And I kind of incorporated it into my lawsuit because I needed to see a counselor anyways for the cognitive issues and for the PTSD of being hit by a semi truck. So now I've got that compounding with the COVID infection. And I have no shame. I understand that it's okay to ask for help. I mean, when you need it, you need it. And there's a lot of people out there in my shoes who are not asking for help, that feel crazy. And I felt like it was my job to let everybody know you're not crazy. Even when I'm having these nutty thoughts and I'm all over the map, I kept reassuring everybody online, in my groups and on my Facebook page, listen, you're not alone. This is a really isolating illness. It is scary. And just know that if anybody want to talk to me, reach out. Well, on the surface, everyone would go on with the whole, you're a liar, there's no way. Then I got infected again. My daughter went to Chicago, came back. Now, well, that's a story within itself. The law will make you go for visitation. If you're positive, they don't care, and you still have to fly. Ethically, that was not right in my book, but the law is the law. So she comes back from Chicago for Thanksgiving. And again, within 3 days, we both test positive. She was asymptomatic. This was also before we ever even knew you could get it twice, that there was such thing as asymptomatic infection. And being at the forefront of all of these things, I really did look like the craziest one of the bunch, because now I'm really lying, because there's no way that tests wouldn't show positive when you're positive. There's no way you can get it twice. There's no way that she could be positive and not have symptoms. I mean, it was so much abuse from just my peers. Had I known what was going to happen when I started seeing doctors, and that made Facebook bearable, because the humiliation, first of all, you're so sick, and it's not, nobody explains it to you. They just tell you, oh, you're going to have a cough, runny nose, etc., maybe a bad headache. Well, they don't tell you all of your joints are going to ache to where anything you do, it hurts to walk, where you feel that lactic acid, like if you were to work out really hard and you have that lactic acid burning feeling in every muscle in your body. It was torturous. I mean, it was really torture. And I had gotten to the point where my doctor wanted to just resign me, I guess, for lack of time. And he couldn't do it anymore because I was not the model patient. I sick. he was very proud of, he never had a patient who went to the hospital. He never had one that died. And that was his calling card. And I was making him look bad because I was very vocal on all the mommy groups. I wasn't getting better. I was getting worse. And he sends me to, before we sever our ties, I had to go to a pulmonologist because my lungs ached so bad, and they were, they weren't crystallized the way that they say it happens, but they had the beginnings of scar tissue. It was obvious that I had pneumonia. And on top of pneumonia, then I got bronchitis. Then I got a sinus infection. The inflammation was insane. And I've never had tinnitus before. That showed up. And I went to an ENT, and he said, well, a lot of times when you're stopped up and you have a sinus infection, that's going to happen, and you're going to have tinnitus. It's not unusual. And there's a little fluid in your ears. So I thought that was going to go away. To this day, 5 years later, it hasn't. It seems to kind of come and go. And while we're talking, if I'm talking, I don't hear it as much. But otherwise, it sounds like all day when it's quiet, this high-pitched dog whistle all day in my ears. It keeps me from concentrating. It sounds like there's a heartbeat, like I can literally feel this heartbeat throbbing in my ears. And that's 24 hours a day. So when I saw the ENT, and we thought, okay, antibiotics, it'll resolve the problem. No, it didn't. The inflammation got worse and worse. And to the point where I could not swallow. I couldn't breathe through my nose. And he suggested getting my sinus passages and my throat, all of it cauterized, which if you don't know what that means, they burn it all.
Cauterized.
And, yeah. And
Yeah.
so go in and burn all of the inflammation to get rid of it. That was so painful. I'd rather give birth 6 times than go through that again. It was awful, and a lot of blood. It was a very bloody experience. So we go through that. Then on top of the pleurisy, the pneumonia, and frankly, in my opinion, somebody in my shoes who still had a hole in her neck from my surgery in December, I should not have been, the doctor shouldn't have been treating me at that point, because there were so many things wrong with me that they're taking a risk. They're taking a risk doing anything on a body that is so beat up, so immune compromised, so inflamed. But of course, I'm following the doctors. What do I know? And I mean, at that time, it's different now. At that time, I had a lot of faith and trust in the doctors, and who wouldn't? Why would we not trust our doctors? So we know why we won't trust them now as a long hauler. And I was exhausted. I was tired, and I got to the point where after infection number 2, and after nose cauterized, or all of this cauterized, and then it coming back, and this pleurisy, which I'd never heard of in my life, inflammation kind of under my ribs. Sometimes it happens with people who have pneumonia. That wouldn't go away, and it truly felt like somebody 24 hours a day was kicking me with boots right under my ribs. So all of this, by then I had lost 30 pounds, and I was not putting it back on. I'm a mess. So I didn't fear falling asleep, because when I went to sleep, I was okay with not waking up in the morning. I started to give up because it was beyond bearable. And the more I spoke with people online and the medicine progressed a little bit, not a lot, there were a little more options, whether it was CBD or melatonin or something, there was a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. We were making progress. Vaccine is on the way. And there was talk that maybe the vaccine might even help with people who had these ongoing symptoms. At that time, then they referred to it as the long haulers. And so I decide, okay, you know what? Now that I've got all these options, I'm going to make it. Maybe, why not? A positive attitude isn't going to kill me. So I began really connecting with all of these doctors and patients online, seeing what they're doing. I was getting to talk to doctors at Vanderbilt and all of these other places. I got to a point where I actually I had respect because of all of the knowledge that I had acquired throughout this whole journey. And I wasn't shy when it came to sharing my experience. So I was on podcasts from bed, and then it became sort of a 24-hour thing. When I wasn't sleeping, I was an activist. And I think that alone changed my attitude so much that I got a little bit better. Not great, but I could handle it more so, if that makes sense. Then I joined organizations, Mass Together America. I became one of their founding members. And actually, that's when the World Health Network started. And I was there at their very first meeting when they were establishing the World Health Network. And it's kind of crazy. I was there at that time. Then I went about other advocacy work. And so be that as it may, I'm doing all of my stuff with Mass Together America. Start getting a little bit better. Not great, but enough to where, I could go get the mail. I knew I probably shouldn't be driving. My vision was really off. I didn't realize how off until I started falling. And it's this whole visuospatial impairment that I guess now it's pretty common for long COVID. And you don't realize it, and you think, your depth perception is off. Well, I start falling down the stairs and simply walking across the room, and I don't even realize how badly I was hurt because I had no feeling. I didn't realize I had no feeling. But then I would look and I'd have bruises like this big, black bruises, and I didn't feel it. To this day, I don't feel. In my legs, you could stab me, I still would not feel. And it became quite clear that not only does this jack with your mental health, it messes with every nerve in your body. And that was, it was a frightening realization, because I thought I was kind of alone because not everybody was sharing those things online. So I started, and I would put pictures of bruises. Little by little, people started coming out. Diana Barrett, the one who started Survivor Corps, wrote about her son having a tooth fall out. Well, my teeth started falling out. And Dr. Marjorie, she's another woman in our community, she had teeth falling out. And so we become comrades, and we're going through this experience together. And it's starting to rot away my teeth. So the inflammation came back. Headache comes and goes. The tinnitus is awful. Heart rate is way off. All of a sudden, I see myself seeing every doctor you can imagine. I'm at an endocrinologist because my thyroid is now completely wacky. We had little clots in my blood, so now I've got a rheumatologist. Then we got the pulmonologist because of the issues with my lungs. and I have nebulizers and inhalers, and add it all up at the end of the day, I have about 35 meds that I take to this day. That's expensive. It's very expensive. It was really difficult having to see all of those doctors. I realized I had to start lying. If I wanted to get treated, I had to lie and just claim I was there for the symptom. I'm just here because it hurts to breathe. Because if I said anything about COVID, then I must be hysterical. Oh, she's crazy. There's no such thing. We've never heard of COVID doing this. That doesn't even make sense. And that was hard. You start second guessing yourself. Because yeah, I thought maybe it was just my body caving in on itself. And then of course you find out more people have all these issues. Now it's starting to come out on the news, but doctors in Texas especially didn't buy it. So I'm fighting all of these battles, just myself with my health, physically, mentally, emotionally, dealing with everybody calling me a liar and wanting attention. Family has abandoned me. It was the most lonely, isolating feeling ever. And I will say that until the end of time, that this is the most isolating, the most lonely illness that's out there. And because you're trapped. You know, if you go outside, if you get this again, chances are, better than worse, that it may take you down. You know that with tachycardia and all of these other issues, scarring of the lungs, inflammation, dizziness, found out that I was having seizures. Didn't know that until sitting there, my husband said, well, that was weird. You just had a seizure. I didn't know that that was a thing. And so we don't know how often I was having. So now I've got to go see a neurologist for that. I've got all these doctors. The thing has become a nightmare. We are now working on year 3, and this is still going on. Problems did not resolve the way that everyone said they would at all. And they shifted, and they would kind of, you know, one day it's my vision, one day it's my hearing. And now you seem to find that a lot, that everyone's going, what? Huh? Because we sort of all, I don't know if you've dealt with that, but it's hearing seems to be a real big issue. And so, but nobody's putting the dots together. And I think that's the biggest problem with all of this, is that when I'm going to these doctors and I realize the only way to be taken seriously is to not mention COVID, and then I would be taken care of just fine. They would address my symptoms like anybody else and take care of me. But the key was never mention COVID. And it starts, I realized too, also, this was another thing. I have to lie and say I have a fever to be taken seriously. That's a big one. That's a really big one. And actually to this day, CDC still says fever free and you can do this. Well, I didn't have a fever. Like the whole first experience, I didn't start having fevers until further on in my illness. And we know now that only 17% of those who have been infected had a fever. And if you look at it, it really makes sense, because I'm immune compromised. Why would I have a fever? That means my body is working. It means my body's fighting. And it wasn't fighting. And I didn't have that fever. But I had to lie and say that I did. I had to say my oxygen was a little lower than it was. You just had to do this to get the attention you needed. And people are still doing that, and they shouldn't have to. They still, do you have a fever? No? Oh, well, then you're fine. People don't even know what oxygen saturation is. And there are just things where I feel like our government has failed. I know I'm all over the place, but this.
So are you, Becky, you're saying that the doctors you encountered don't understand the importance of oxygen saturation? Is you're saying the doctor specifically? That's what you're referring to. Okay,
Yeah, they weren't connecting the dots.
I
They
see.
didn't understand that, oh, you have tachycardia, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. You have
Tachycardia, yeah, that's right.
that's tied to the issues with your lungs that are similar to asthma. Lots of budesonide inhalers all over the house, and I never had problems with my lungs. No doctor was putting all of this together. And when I'd go in to see a doctor, I would write on every, I want to say application, but every form, I would put on the very top, I have been sick on this date, this date, this date. And at that time, I had, it was right before the vaccines came out. I said I intended to get a vaccine, but I put all of this personal information on there, thinking that a doctor's going to see the big picture, you know, and he's going to see that, oh, wait a second, you can't feel pain in your legs, and you got that might tie into your brain, and the vascular issues, you know, nobody put that together. The blood pooling, the PEM, the hot symptoms, no one. And I guess I gave doctors more credit for keeping up with the science.
Can let me
Uh-huh.
if I can just sort of pause and kind of recap for a moment. I mean, you've explained, I think, incredibly vividly your experiences with your initial infection, you know, and the trauma associated with that, and the steps you took to try to care for yourself, to try to care for your family. I think you've described, you know, the mental toll that took, not only personally, but in terms of interactions with your family, with your close family, as well as your extended family. Um, and you've also described, I think, remarkably clearly the great, you know, sort of landscape, I guess, for lack of a better term, of long COVID symptoms that people with this condition can experience. Not to mention, as you were just speaking about a moment ago, you know, the challenges that you had and that I've had, that I've heard other long COVID sufferers explain in terms of getting doctors to recognize that these are indeed symptoms of long COVID, and that there's a constellation of symptoms that people have to deal with. Um, that documentation that you were describing a moment ago, you know, that's something that I've heard other long COVID, other people living with long COVID describe. For that matter, other people living with other chronic illnesses, making that extra effort to have people in the medical profession take them seriously. Um, if I may, at this point, let's perhaps jump ahead a little bit. And now that we've kind of been talking about these challenges that you faced in terms of getting treatment, getting valuable treatment, and getting doctors to sort of respect your accounting of this condition, speak a little bit, if I can ask you, about what support you've received, medical support from other advocates, other people in the community that you find is helpful and beneficial for you, and other aspects of that that you'd like to see perhaps grow within the long COVID community.
Yes, there. First of all, I have to laugh when you say support care from doctors, because it doesn't exist. And
That's a fair answer to that question.
there's just, it doesn't exist. If I can interject, that right before the vaccine, and this was where I really saw a dark side of doctors.
Mm-hmm.
This rash, and they became like ulcers all over my body, head to toe. I mean, like pussy, bleeding. They were just horrible, awful, ugly, just head to toe. And they took shape in every shape. Well, like they took the form of like measles over here, chickenpox over here, eczema over here, dermatitis, all of this all over my body. And I did a lot of research on that. Apparently, yes, it's very common. You can have rashes when you have a virus. It's not unheard of, but I guess it's unheard of in the doctor's offices. So and they burned. It was very painful. It was unsightly. I threw away all my bathing suits because I knew I was never going to wear them again. I threw away all my mini skirts. No point in having them because I was never going to show my legs again. It was bad, and I would share the picture with people. Then the vaccine came out just about the same time as I developed this rash. So everyone started saying it was the vaccine. And I would show people the dates. They don't correlate that. I know I had the rash before the vaccine. For some reason that didn't click. It's people wanted to believe that. And I don't know if it was anti-vaxxers. I don't know if it was a doctor just afraid to say, you know what, I don't know what I don't know, but I'll find out. I'll research it. I'll look it up. And doctors are so reluctant to do that. I don't understand why. Why is it such a big deal? I mean, this is science. It evolves. And Fauci said it plenty of times. You know, I mean, it's going to be different as we learn more information. And doctors were just oblivious to this concept. I assumed that they had scientific minds, they had intellectual curiosity, that they wanted to learn more. If I'm a doctor, I want to be there on the brink of a discovery. I want to be right there. I want to find out. I want to have that patient that I turn around and have them, healed when nobody thought they could. But they don't feel that way, or at least the doctors I went to didn't feel that way. And that's very, very frustrating. You're not believed. People are blaming it on the vaccine. You've already been through hell and back. You're asking for help. No one's there to help you. You also have this looming fear because people have never taken it seriously. On a grand scale, they've never taken it seriously. You have this fear haunting you that, oh my gosh, anywhere I go, I'm subject to getting infected again. And I can't go to the doctors and feel safe. I can't see my family and feel safe. So getting support from people who don't take an illness seriously. I mean, I have a whole new understanding and empathy for those with ME and CFS with Lyme. Right. I get it. I get it. And we didn't have, I guess we just didn't have the knowledge, obviously. I mean, now we're learning more about long COVID, which is also giving us more information about other chronic illnesses, which is great. I just think we're moving too slow, way too slow. This is our life, and we need support. If in my ideal world, whether it's insurance or just an advocacy group in general, it would be wonderful to have somebody there when you're delirious, because that still happens to this day, in particular with this variant right now. You're delirious, you can't advocate for yourself. And your family doesn't understand. How are you going to get help from everybody who doesn't even believe that this is real? And we're now in a position where to get a doctor, we have to ask them, do you believe in COVID? Do you believe it's real? As though it were a religion. And that's so ridiculous. So yeah, where I find my support, it's in advocacy, in the people that I've met. I have met and fallen in love with the family I never knew I needed. We are spaces now on Twitter. I moderate for pages on Facebook. Still, if given the opportunity, we'll do podcasts. And it's really become a very loving environment. And we know that, hey, no one else understands us. No one else understands why we're not going to get on a plane. And we're the only ones hungry for this information. Does it get old? Well, yeah, for most people, but for us, it doesn't, because there's no treatment and there's no treatment, there's no cure, there's no sterilizing vax. So of course, all of us, we want to find the answer. So we have the same goal. And we're trying to move mountains, but we're just little ants trying to move mountains. The more ants we can get, I think eventually we're gonna move mountains. We're gonna build a pyramid, 6 of them. But it's unfortunately gonna take a lot more people getting sick. But this is not sustainable. I will say that this is not sustainable. People cannot get reinfected over and over again. It's just not. You get IQ points knocked off every time you get COVID. The destruction that it does to our bodies. Until doctors get up to speed, and I don't know how to make that happen. And I've thought continuing education, like mandatory. Frankly, that should be in place. Mandatory education on all things COVID. Understand that all of these different systems work together and everything is impacted. So I don't know how to get that message out there to them. That's kind of a struggle. I will do whatever I can. And we brainstorm at 4 o'clock in the morning because we still are dealing with insomnia issues. Last night, there's 30 of us in a room and we're hanging on the latest news stories. And the biggest one last night was that it has now come out on a large grand scale that the impact that COVID has on the brain, not just physically or neurologically, but mentally and emotionally, and all of these different mental illnesses that can come about from the infection. And what's nice about it is that they say it applies to the unvaccinated and to the vaccinated. It doesn't matter. It still impacts your brain, whether it's suicidal ideation, depression, OCD. They are now putting those dots together. And so in a lot of the psychiatry magazines, they're getting a grip. They're getting a grip on it. And that's big progress, a big progress, because we're so used to everybody thinking we're crazy, doctors thinking we're crazy, dismissing us, telling us, with my rash, that I was doing it to myself, which is so absurd. Now, like I told you, I document all of it. So secretly, I have documentation of doctors gaslighting me, checking out my rash on my leg, doing biopsies, making fun of me, and calling my rash neurotic excoriations. Well, you don't have to be super smart to figure that out. Neurotic and excoriation scratching. So in his doctor speak, thinking I wouldn't know. And that's cruel. That's cruel. Why not just tell me, I don't know where it came from. No, you're not crazy. There's no way you could pick things on the back of your back. And why would you ever do this to yourself? But that's what we're up against. I mean, long COVID, I wouldn't wish this hell on anybody. To try and prove yourself while you're feeling so sick. And I have braces on my knees because my joints hurt all the time. I spend $2,000 a month that I don't have on medications. I had to hire a bougie concierge doctor for an extra $200 a month just so I could have medical care at my disposal, because I can't do this when doctors, and we had people last night, well, I can't get in to see the cardiologist until January. What? That's not acceptable. That's not acceptable at all. And now we're all dealing with that. So yeah, we're all having to pay outside of insurance to get extra help just from somebody that may or may not believe us.
We've in our other discussions with people living with long COVID, I think it's really important to reiterate this point when we have this discussion, and I think you've stated it yourself very beautifully. This idea that individuals like yourself, people with other individuals who suffer with long COVID and other chronic illnesses, are enduring such intense systemic symptoms, and their energy is at such a premium
Huh.
because of these circumstances. And yet, because there is such an extraordinary lack of infrastructure and knowledge around this condition, people like yourself are put in a position of having to use what precious little energy you have to build the infrastructure, so to speak, for your own treatment and care. And I think the point you're making now really hits that on the head. And that's something that when I participate in these conversations that I am always struck by. And I think it's important to reiterate. I think you've spoken pretty clearly about these sort of tent poles, if you will, of education 100% for doctors, for everybody around long COVID, of advocacy, of course, of community. And you've described, I think, the value that the long COVID community brings to you and that you're able to bring to them in terms of sharing your experiences and trying to move forward with building that infrastructure. You may have already answered this question, but I have to ask, therefore, what would you say in light of everything that we've been discussing today, and in light of all that you've experienced over these past 4-ish years, what would you say is the most important action that needs to happen around COVID and long COVID to help people in your position move forward?
Number one, and I have to say this, is to be heard. To be heard. For 5 years, we've been saying the same thing in 50 different ways with 100 different symptoms, and no one hears us.
Mm-hmm.
And if at least they took time to be curious and find out, to talk to the patient, to believe the patient. But we need to get doctors up to speed. I mean, to me, that is the most important. Now, there are others who might say biomarkers are the most important. In my opinion, why not repurpose drugs? Something. Give us hope. Let us know that there's something beyond waiting 10 years, 15 years, because there's also there's a lot of similarities to AIDS with this virus, and a lot, especially T cell, B cell, everything it does to the body. This, in many ways, is, one could call it kind of like a COVID acquired immune deficiency syndrome. It does that much damage to your body. And we are slowly but surely getting that message out there because we don't have time. We don't have time to waste. We don't have time for our children to get reinfected over and over again. It took about 8 to 10 years for you to see what happened with the HIV pandemic and what toll it took. It took that long. It took everybody being, 80 pounds with sores all over themselves, people dying. It took that to get movement, to get progress, to get medicine to be heard. They had to go to DC, which is something our long COVID advocacy groups, we've done that. We've spoken in front of Lincoln Memorial, and we've established a long COVID International Awareness Day with advocates across the globe. We are so connected and interwoven. It's pretty powerful when you realize that at grassroots, I didn't give it much. I didn't realize how powerful and how strong we could be when we're holding hands across countries, across the globe, with people that we would probably never in a million years be friends with, hang in the same social group. We don't know what they look like. They're an avatar on a screen, but we all want the same thing. And we want to be believed. We want treatment. We want hope. I think that's above and beyond anything. We want hope because right now I don't see a whole lot of it. Graded exercise, as some of the studies are doing, exercise and long COVID don't go together. They don't. So we're all sitting here watching the NIH spend valuable dollars on studies to get patients well with exercise. Well, that will kill us. It's silly, and it's a struggle. We're all sitting there watching this stuff happen, and I think if they give patients more of a role in developing trials, we'd get somewhere. We would get somewhere. And I'm in every trial that exists. I even have written out paperwork that all of my organs are going to be donated to COVID research.
Wow.
I am that passionate about it. I mean, I wear a watch that
Sure.
communicates with what it gives all my vitals to another organization. I'm in a Vanderbilt support group, and they are watching all of us as we go through this. We've seen people pass away in our support group. That's hard. But it's this support system, the network of people. It is tremendous every time we see progress. And that's what even your organization, the World Health Network, it's amazing. And I know you've seen it, how much one can do with an idea and other people's ideas and come together. I'm proud. I'm proud to say that I'm a member of such a community. I really am, because I know that we have each other's back. I trust them more than I trust my family. I really do. Really
Becky
do.
Robertson, I think we should probably close there on that thought on recognizing the value of the community that you've built despite all of the health struggles that you've been facing, and of course, other long COVID sufferers in your community have been facing. And I should reiterate a moment ago when you were describing that you felt that the most important thing that you believe we could do in terms of long COVID advocacy was listening to patients, listening to sufferers. I want to repeat that because I can see how important it is to you, and I know how critical that is to WHN and to the work that we're trying to do with the Long COVID Awareness Campaign. And of course, that's part of the reason why you're here, volunteering so generously your time and your story to share with us and to share with our viewers. So I want to thank you sincerely for being here with us today and sharing your story with us.
I have to tell you one last thing is
Okay.
that we have special guest speakers come in and talk in our forums in the long COVID community. And Dr. David Petrino, who's made a lot of strides in this area.
Mm-hmm.
His advice is listen to your patients. And so he's coming from the opposite end. But when he finishes his interviews, that's the last thing he always references is doctors, listen to your patients. And I heard him say that after I have expressed how important it is to be heard. And so when he said that, I felt like, wow, this guy gets it. He understands, and I hope people listen. I hope doctors listen. That's all we want, to be heard.
Once again, Becky Robertson from McKinney, Texas. Thank you so much for spending time with us today and telling us your long COVID story. And I think, once again, leaving us with that critical information. Listen to patients, doctors, family members, allies, listen to patients. I'm really honored that you've spent time with me today telling your story and that I've had an opportunity to listen to you speak about this experience. So thanks again. In closing, once again, the Long COVID Awareness Campaign is part of the World Health Network. My name is Ben Calderwood here on our YouTube channel. The World Health Network is a global organization devoted to ending the COVID health threat. If you're interested in learning more about the World Health Network and maybe joining us, You can find out more at whn.global. Thank you so much, and we will see you in the next broadcast.
Thank you. Thanks so much.